My name is Catherine Ross. I'm 65 years old. And I've come to understand something very late in my life. I didn't ruin my years by making the wrong choices. I lost them by waiting to make the right ones. I'm not saying this for sympathy. I'm not saying it because I want reassurance that it all meant something. I'm saying it because I'm closer to the end now than the beginning, and there are truths that only seem to show themselves when there's no longer enough time left to act on them. Most days now are quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. You hear the clock in the kitchen. You hear your own footsteps, and sometimes you pause just to make sure they're really yours. I wake up early, not because I want to, but because my body does. I think about how many mornings I assumed I would have. I think about how often I told myself, not yet. I always believed there would be a moment when things would line up. When the timing would be right. When I'd finally feel ready. I didn't know that waiting could take so much without making a sound. When I was younger, I didn't see myself as someone who was afraid. I thought of myself as careful, responsible, patient. Those words sound respectable. They sounded that way to everyone around me, too. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't impulsive. I didn't make big mistakes that people warn you about. I went to work. I paid my bills. I showed up when I was supposed to. I told myself I was building something solid. In my 20s, I believed life worked in stages. You do the sensible things first. You make room for joy later. I had a job I didn't hate. That felt like enough. I rented a small apartment with thin walls and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of old coffee. I told myself it was temporary. Everything was temporary back then. I had dreams, but they weren't loud ones. They were quiet, personal thoughts I kept to myself. I wanted to travel. Not extravagantly. Just enough to feel unfamiliar places under my feet. I wanted to write, even though I never told anyone that out loud. I wanted a family, but only if it felt real, not rushed. There were chances. They just never felt convenient. A friend asked me once, when I was 27, why I didn't come with her when she moved across the country. She said I could figure things out as I went. I laughed and told her I wasn't that kind of person. I told myself I was being mature. I had relationships, too. A few that mattered. Men who were kind enough. Men who were flawed in ordinary ways. I remember one man in particular. His name was Daniel. He liked to cook on Sundays. He talked about wanting a small house with a garden. He asked me, gently, if I saw a future together. I told him I wasn't sure yet. I meant it honestly. I wasn't ready. I thought readiness was something that arrived one day, like a letter in the mail. He waited longer than he should have. Then one evening, he didn't. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse me of anything. He just said he didn't want to keep living in the space between now and someday. I told myself it was for the best. That became a pattern I didn't recognize at the time. In my 30s, I worked more. Not because I loved it, but because it filled the space. Work is very good at pretending to be meaningful. It gives you deadlines. It gives you praise that sounds like purpose. I stayed late. I volunteered for extra responsibilities. I told myself I was investing in my future. People admired my reliability. They trusted me. No one asked if I was happy. I don't think I would have known how to answer anyway. My parents were still alive then. I assumed they always would be. I visited, but not as often as I could have. There was always another weekend. Another holiday. Another time when things would slow down. My mother would ask me if I was seeing anyone. I'd shrug and say, "Not really." She never pushed. She trusted my judgment. I trusted it too. That's the strange part. I wasn't miserable. I wasn't unhappy enough to change. I was comfortable enough to stay still. The years didn't announce themselves as they passed. They just blended. 40 arrived quietly. So did 50. By then, people around me were settling into lives that looked finished. Children grew. Marriages hardened into routines. Stories were already being told about who they were. I was still waiting for mine to begin. I told myself I was different. That my life would unfold later. I didn't understand that later isn't a place you arrive at. It's something that keeps moving ahead of you. The cost didn't come all at once. It came in small moments. An invitation I declined because I was tired. A phone call I didn't return until days later. A birthday, I sent a card instead of showing up. None of it felt dramatic. It all felt reasonable. But absence accumulates. People stop asking after a while. Not out of anger. Just out of adjustment. They learn where you fit in their lives and where you don't. I didn't notice at first. Then one day, I realized my calendar was empty in a way it hadn't been before. I filled it with errands. Doctor appointments. Work meetings. I told myself this was adulthood. When my father got sick, it felt sudden, even though it wasn't. Illness rarely is. I remember sitting in the hospital room, the air smelling like disinfectant and something metallic. He looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile in a way that didn't seem possible when I was younger. I thought about all the conversations we never had. Not because we fought. Because we assumed there would be time. He died on a Tuesday morning. I went back to work that Thursday. I told myself routine would help. My mother followed a few years later. That's when the house I grew up in stopped feeling like a place and started feeling like an ending. I inherited boxes of old photographs, letters, things I didn't know what to do with. I kept telling myself I'd go through them properly someday. I still haven't. The turning point didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly, like everything else. I was diagnosed with a heart condition at 61. Not life-ending, just life-altering. The doctor spoke carefully, like he didn't want to scare me. He talked about management, about lifestyle adjustments. I nodded. I asked practical questions. But something shifted when I got home and sat alone in my living room. I realized I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of how little I had truly lived. There were things I had never done because I was waiting to feel ready. Conversations I postponed because the timing wasn't right. Love, I didn't accept because I wanted certainty. Certainty never came. I saw my life laid out behind me, not as a series of mistakes, but as a long pause. That's when it finally became clear. I wasn't waiting for the right moment. I was using it as a shield. If you wait, you don't have to risk being wrong. If you wait, you don't have to face the possibility that what you want might not work out. Waiting feels safe. Until you look back and realize safety took everything with it. There are things now that can't be fixed. Not because I don't want to, but because the time simply isn't there. Some relationships have cooled beyond repair. Some dreams don't make sense at this age. Some versions of me never got to exist. I don't rage about it. I don't cry every day. But there is a steady ache. A low hum of knowing. People talk about regret like it's dramatic. It comes with tears and breakdowns. Most of the time, it's quieter than that. It's noticeable that no one would really miss you if you didn't show up somewhere. It's realizing your name doesn't come up in stories the way you thought it might. It's understanding that being dependable isn't the same as being remembered. I still find moments of gratitude. I'm not ungrateful for my life. But gratitude doesn't erase the empty spaces. If you're listening to this, I don't know how old you are. I don't know what you're waiting for. All I can tell you is what I wish someone had told me, not as advice, but as truth. The right moment is quieter than you expect. And it doesn't announce itself. It looks like an ordinary day. It feels inconvenient. It asks you to risk being unsure. And if you keep waiting for clarity, you may never move at all. I thought time was something I could store. I thought I was being patient. I didn't realize I was spending it. I don't have a dramatic ending to this. No sudden redemption. I wake up. I make my tea. I take my walks. I live carefully with what remains. Sometimes I sit and talk out loud, just to hear a voice in the room. Sometimes I go days without speaking to anyone. This isn't meant to frighten you. It's just the shape of a life lived cautiously. If this meant something to you, if it stirred something you've been setting aside, you don't need to do anything dramatic. Just don't assume you'll recognize the moment when it comes. I didn't. And now, at 65, I understand something I didn't before. Time doesn't wait for permission. It just moves on. And all we can do, in the end, is be honest about where we stand.